You're different and you're authorized. Hope you're ready for this today. Got something for you. All right. Hope everyone's doing well on this Sunday. I know you never know what people are going through when you encounter them, whether that's through your work week, in the grocery store, wherever you're at. But the good news is that we have some help to get us through whatever it is that we're facing. And so today, my prayer for you is that you have all the help you need to do everything that you are called to do. All right. Give it just a couple minutes, and I won't be before you long this afternoon. What's up with you? What's up with you? Who's here? What you got going on in this fine October day? Hey, Mom. How you doing? How you doing? Good to see you. Good to see you. Good to be seen. All of that. All right. Welcome to Weekly Wisdom. Welcome to Weekly Wisdom. I'm going to be talking to you today from Jeremiah, the first chapter, verses 5 through 10. Jeremiah, the first chapter, verses 5 through 10, the New Living Translation. And it says, well, and this is God speaking to the prophet Jeremiah, and he says, I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb. Before you were born, I set you apart and appointed you as my prophet to the nations. O sovereign Lord, I said, I can't speak for you. I'm too young. Verse 7, the Lord replied, don't say I'm too young, for you must go wherever I send you and say whatever I tell you. And don't be afraid of the people, for I will be with you and will protect you. I, the Lord, have spoken. Then the Lord reached out and touched my mouth and said, look, I have put my words in your mouth. Today I appoint you to stand up against nations and kingdoms. Some you must uproot and tear down, destroy and overthrow. Others you must build up and plant. I'm going to talk to you from this subject. You're different and you're authorized. What's up, Heather? You're right on time to hear that. You're different and you're authorized. All right. So this text begins with God speaking to Jeremiah, beginning to give Jeremiah his calling, letting him know what his purpose is and where it began. At the same time, simultaneously, as God begins to give this word to Jeremiah, later in his life, Jeremiah shares it in the written text. And I believe that it is a word that's speaking and giving some clarity to each and every one of us that is here today. And he looks at Jeremiah and he lets him know something that really is a bit earth shattering. It begins to boggle the mind. And God speaks to Jeremiah and he told Jeremiah, and he's telling you, I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb. Before you were born, I set you apart and appointed you as my prophet for the nations. Oh my goodness. I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb. Before you were born, I set you apart and appointed you as my prophet to the nations. I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb. Think about that. God speaking to you, and he says, really, the technicality of the vessel that you came through is just that. It's just a technicality. I knew you way before I determined what vessel you would come through. So it is not your family identity that determines your purpose. Instead, it is how you have already existed in the mind of God that begins to become our purpose, so that we can live out a calling of becoming and being what he pictured and envisioned in his mind before we even came through the vehicle of birth to enter into this landscape of the earth in which we live. He says, I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb. God speaks to the prophet Jeremiah and gives us each a revelation. God speaks and he says, let me see, four things that I want to deal with really quickly today. First, in that scripture, I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb. Before you were born, I set you apart and appointed you as my prophet to the nations. There's four things that happen there that I want to discuss. Number one, God announces his authorship over your creation. He announces that he is indeed your inventor, that he is the one who handcrafted you and caused you to exist. God announces his authorship over your creation. He is the one who formed you. It is his hands that put the clay in the right places, that made you just how he intended to make you. He crafted you. He formed you before you were in your mother's womb. He says, I formed you in the place that you became alive, the place that you came to exist. I formed you before I knew you, before I formed you. So in other words, I already had interaction with you. I already had seen how you would function. I already knew what you would do before you even started the process of becoming. I already knew you. God announces, so that's the first. He announces his authorship over your creation. He's the one who formed you. Number two, God explains the vision that he has always had for you and your life. He has always had a vision for you and for your life. I don't know why I feel so strongly about sharing this with you and why you had to feel so strongly about getting here today. But I believe that it's something that you need to engage with, that you need to really begin to understand. God explains the vision that he has always had for you and for your life. Before you existed in your mother's womb, you existed in the mind of God. Number three, God normalizes your uniqueness. Oh my goodness. God normalizes your uniqueness. He says, you're different. And I like that. Because you're different, I can use you to do something different than what has ever been done. He needs a unique vessel in order to do a unique work. He needs you to be able to reach who others who have followed after certain patterns won't be able to reach. He needs you just in the uniqueness that you have. The stuff that sometimes frustrates you because it makes you feel like an outcast. It makes you feel like an outsider. Those are the things that God looks at and says, "Oh yeah, she's just right." Those are the things that God sees. Those personality traits. Those what others might even call quirks. Yeah, it's your quirkiness that He wants to use. It is the way that you see the world different than those in your sphere. It's the fact that you don't. Oh my goodness, you don't think the same way as those who you progressed from. You don't function right. Some of you don't even understand why is it that I feel so different. And sometimes you can find clashes even with people who grew up in the same context with you because you're different. You're different, and you're different on purpose. And He authorized your difference. He authorized your uniqueness. So He begins even with His word to normalize your uniqueness, to help you to understand it's all right that you're different. Matter of fact, it's just how I wanted you. It's okay that you don't fit in because you can't fit in when you are called to stand out. Oh my goodness. He normalized. He says, don't you start thinking that there's something wrong with you because you see the world differently than other people who are around you. Don't you begin to fall into the trap of beginning to position yourself as a clone carbon copy when I have created you to be an original, to be a trendsetter, an innovator, a trailblazer, somebody who writes their own story, who carves out their own path. You are different on purpose. So God normalizes your difference. So first, God announces His authorship over your creation. Number two, God explains the vision that He has always had for you and your life. Number three, God normalizes your uniqueness. He made you to excel. It's okay for you to succeed even through a different path than you've seen others succeed from. It's okay that you are charting a different course. He has authorized your power. Before you walked a day on this earth, he gave you authority to do the unique work that he called you to do. Oh my goodness. He formed you in his mind. He saw a problem on this earth and he handcrafted you to usher in the solution to the problem that he saw in the context that he dropped you into. I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb. Before you were born, I set you apart and appointed you as a prophet to the nation. So he announces his authorship over your creation. He explains the vision that he has always had for you and your life. He normalizes your uniqueness and he authorizes your power. Oh my goodness. Verse 6 continues, "O sovereign Lord." Jeremiah begins to respond to this whole lesson that God lays out, and he begins to respond and he says, "O sovereign Lord," I said, that he has always had for you and your life. He normalizes your uniqueness and he authorizes your power. And then look at our response, which is the same as Jeremiah's response. Jeremiah looks back at him after all of this has been brought forward and he says, "Lord, I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it." How many times have you felt a nudge and a call from God to do something great, to do something that will change the sphere that you operate in, to do something that goes against the grain of what normally happens in the environment that you've been planted in? And when God tells you to do it, your initial response, your initial feedback, even though he has already declared that he has positioned you for this, that he has created you for this, that he has authorized you for this, that he's made you unique just for this, we look back at him and we say, "I can't do it. I can't do it. I'm not talented enough. I'm not qualified. They won't receive it from me." And we begin to talk ourselves out of the purpose that we were born for. Oh my goodness. Don't talk yourself out of the purpose that God designed you for, that he authorized you for. He says, "I'm not talented enough. I'm not qualified enough. They won't receive it from me. I'm too young." Every excuse begins to just come out and exude from his mouth. "I'm not the type of package that normally delivers this kind of message. I'm not what they're expecting." Oh my goodness. So after all of that setup that God does, giving Jeremiah an explanation for his uniqueness, authority for his power and his gifting, authority and giving him a position and a kingdom title to do what no one has done before in his stead, Jeremiah turns around and begins to give every excuse, ultimately to say, "I can't do it. I can't do what you're calling me to do." But with every excuse that Jeremiah offers, it already falls within the confines of the explanation that God has already offered in advance of the question. I can't do it. God's response already was, "I made you for this." I don't know who I'm talking to today. When you begin to feel that "I can't do it," I need you to also hear God's "I made you for this. I designed you for this. I handcrafted you and selected you. I picked you out of the crowd for this. I saw you already successful in my mind, and now it's your path to begin to live it out on this earth in your reality. He says, "I can't do it." God says, "I made you for this." He says, "I'm not talented enough." God said, "I already saw you do this." He says, "I'm not qualified." God says, "I authorized you." Jeremiah says, "They won't receive it from me." God says, "I said I authorized you. I'm too young." God says, "I like that you're unique. I like that you're different." Jeremiah says, "I'm not the type of package that normally delivers this kind of message." And God says, "Exactly. You're just right. You're just Right. Jeremiah says, I'm not what they're expecting. God says, I've given you authority to change their expectations. I've given you authority to change their expectations. Even though God had already answered the questions and responded to the doubt before the questions were asked and the doubt was expressed, God has mercy on Jeremiah and replies to Jeremiah's little speech in verse 7. The Lord replied, don't say I'm too young, for you must go wherever I send you and say whatever I tell you. I'm going to tell you again today, those of you who tuned in, I know you tuned in on purpose to hear this message. You're different and you're authorized. You're different and you're authorized. And technically, I know this much. You're not hardwired. I believe I'm talking to people who are like me. You're not hardwired to be comfortable in confrontation with God. So God says, since I know you really want to be who I called you to be and do what I called you to do, God says in verse 7, let me remind you of something. You must go where I send you, and you must say what I tell you. Verse 8, he continues, he says, and don't be afraid of the people, for I will be with you and will protect you. I, the Lord, have spoken. And I stopped by here today just to reinforce over and over again to you today that you're different and you're authorized. So those who don't understand you, those who don't get you, those who don't think that you're qualified, they don't think that you're capable, they don't have the authority to harm you. Verse 9, it continues, then the Lord reached out and touched my mouth and said, look, I have put my words in your mouth. I have put my words in your mouth. You're different and you're authorized to do what God told you to do and to say what God has put in your mouth to say. Verse 10, today I appoint you to stand up against nations and kingdoms. Some you must uproot and tear down, destroy and overthrow. Others you must build up and plant. You're different and you're authorized, and God has an assignment for you to do. So when doubt begins to creep into your mind, when you begin to feel that you're underqualified, when you begin to feel that you're too different to be able to make a difference, I need you to be able to understand the words of God. Before I formed you in your mother's womb, I knew you and ordained you a prophet to the nations. I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb. Before you were born, I set you apart. I made you different. I set you apart and appointed you, gave you authority. I authorized you as a prophet to the nations. Oh my goodness. So when you begin to doubt, I need you to understand that you are just right for the purpose that God has called you to. He has ordained your difference. He has authorized your uniqueness, and he has given you power to do what nobody else can do in the same way that you can do it. Go in this strength, go in this power, be encouraged, and know that he's with you every step of the way. God bless you. Have a phenomenal week.